At 78 years old, I woke up alone in a house big enough for 6 people. And for the first time in my life, the silence frightened me, not the normal kind of silence, not peaceful silence. This one felt heavy, like the walls themselves were judging me. The grandfather clock downstairs ticked loudly through the dark hallway, while rain tapped against the windows of my countryside home. In northern England, expensive paintings hung on the walls, imported furniture filled every room, crystal glasses sparkled. Beneath dim golden lights, a beautiful house, a successful life. At least that's what everyone used to say. But standing there barefoot at 3 in the morning, staring at my own reflection in the hallway mirror, I realized something horrifying. I had spent my entire life building a life people envied, while secretly becoming miserable inside it. And the worst part, by the time I understood it, almost everyone I loved was already gone. Funny thing about regret, mate, it doesn't arrive loudly, it sneaks in quietly while you're busy chasing things that don't matter. Then one day you wake up old, and suddenly the noise disappears. No meetings, no applause, no ambition left, only memories. And memories can be cruel little bastards. I wasn't always wealthy. I grew up in Liverpool during the late 1950s, in a tiny brick house beside the docks. My father worked repairing ships, while my mother stitched clothes for neighbors to earn extra money. We had very little, but back then little things still felt valuable. Sunday dinners, rainy evenings beside the fireplace, mum humming while cooking, dad laughing after 2 pints down at the pub. I didn't realize it then, but those were the richest years of my life. Of course, when you're young, you're too daft to understand that at 16, all I wanted was escape from struggle, escape from embarrassment, escape from watching my parents count coins at the kitchen table. I still remember the exact moment ambition poisoned me. I was 17, standing outside a hotel near central London during a school trip. A businessman stepped out of a black Jaguar wearing a tailored coat and expensive leather shoes. Everyone moved for him. The doorman smiled. People respected him instantly. And I thought, that's power. From that day onward, I became obsessed with success, not happiness. Success. There's a difference, a massive one. By 25, I was already working in commercial property investment. Long hours, brutal competition, endless deals. And bloody hell, I was good at it. I learned quickly that the world rewards people who sacrifice themselves without complaint. So I sacrificed everything: sleep, health, relationships, peace. At first it felt noble. That's how dangerous ambition works. It disguises self-destruction as discipline. I married my wife Alina. When I was 31, she was kind in a way the world rarely is anymore. The type of woman who noticed lonely people at parties, the type who cried during documentaries about animals, the type who made ordinary days feel warm. And she loved me long before the money arrived. That matters more than people realize. The first few years of our marriage were beautiful: small, flat, cheap furniture, shared dreams. We used to eat takeaway fish and chips on the floor because we couldn't afford a dining table. And honestly, those nights felt happier than the luxury dinners I attended later in life. But success changes people slowly, so slowly you barely notice it happening. At 35, I bought my first luxury car. At 40, my company expanded internationally. At 43, I purchased the countryside estate I once believed would prove it made it. Everyone congratulated me. Everyone admired me. Meanwhile, Alina started sleeping alone most nights. I was always traveling: Paris, Frankfurt, Milan, Amsterdam, meetings, contracts, negotiations. Always another bloody deal waiting somewhere. And every single time Alina asked me to slow down, I gave her the same answer: just a few more years, love. That became my favorite lie: a few more years. Funny how people destroy entire lives using temporary promises. One winter evening, Alina stood beside the kitchen window watching snow fall across the garden. "You know what frightens me?" she asked quietly. I barely looked up from my paperwork. What, that one day y'all finally have enough money and nobody left to share it with? I laughed, actually laughed. God forgive me, because I genuinely believed she was overreacting. I thought providing financially was the same thing as loving someone. It isn't, not even close. The years passed quickly after that. That's another cruel trick life plays on us. The older you become, the faster time moves. Birthdays blur together, Christmases disappear, faces age suddenly. One moment your children are small enough to sit on your shoulders, next moment they barely answer your calls. My son Daniel stopped asking me to attend his football matches after I missed too many. My daughter Sophie once performed piano at school while I attended a business conference in Brussels instead. Lena recorded the performance on VHS tape. I told myself I'd watch it later. I never did. Decades later, after Alina died, I found that tape buried inside a cupboard, still unopened. I sat there holding it like a guilty man holding evidence. That tiny plastic tape weighed heavier than any financial loss I'd ever experienced, because it contained something money could never buy back. A moment, one precious moment I chose to miss forever. That's the problem with chasing success endlessly. You assume life will wait for you. It won't. Life keeps moving. While you're busy making plans. At 56, I finally became the man I always dreamed of becoming: rich, respected, powerful, and completely exhausted. My doctor warned me repeatedly about stress, high blood pressure, insomnia, chest pains. I ignored all of it. Comes with the territory. Id joke. Absolute rubbish. Pain is not proof of success. Burnout is not something to admire, but modern society claps for people destroying themselves, especially men. Work harder, earn more, sleep less, feel nothing. What a tragic way to live. One night after returning from Geneva, I walked into the house and realized something strange. It no longer felt like a home, just a museum of expensive things nobody truly cared about. Alina sat reading beside the fireplace, older, now quieter. There was sadness in her eyes I'd never noticed before, or maybe I simply never looked carefully enough. You missed our anniversary, she said softly. My stomach dropped. I had forgotten. Entirely. Not delayed, forgot. I started apologizing immediately. But she raised her hand gently. No, Arthur, she whispered, I'm tired of hearing apologies, followed by excuses. Then she said something that shattered me years later. I don't think you understand what you're sacrificing anymore. At the time, I still didn't listen. That's the frightening thing about obsession. It deafens you. You stop hearing truth, even when spoken directly into your face. A year later, Alina became ill, cancer, aggressive, sudden, the kind of diagnosis that makes the entire world feel smaller overnight. And for the first time in decades, work stopped mattering. I canceled meetings, ignored calls, stayed home. But deep down, I knew something terrible. I was finally giving Alina time, only because death had entered the room. That guilt still lives inside me. During her final months, we spent long evenings together in silence, not angry silence, tender silence, the kind shared between two people who understand time is running out. One rainy afternoon, she asked me a question I'll never forget. Arthur, were you happy? I opened my mouth immediately, then stopped, because I genuinely didn't know. I had spent so many years chasing achievement that I'd never paused long enough to ask myself why. Alina smiled sadly. You spent your whole life trying not to become your father, she said, and accidentally became someone even lonelier. That sentence cut deeper than grief itself. Because she was right. My father had little money but plenty of presents. I had enormous wealth and almost no presents at all. Alina died 2 weeks later. And mate, nothing prepares you for the silence after losing someone who truly knew you. The house became unbearable. Every room carried memories. Every object reminded me of failure. For months I wandered through those massive hallways like a ghost, trapped inside his own success. Story people assumed money made grief easier. Idiots. Grief doesn't care about your bank account. At 7 to 2, I suffered a minor heart attack while alone in my study. I remember collapsing beside the desk and thinking one absurd thing. So this is how it ends. Not surrounded by family, not peacefully, just an old man dying beside paperwork, bloody, pathetic. The doctors told me stress had damaged my body for years. One young nurse looked at me carefully and said, you survived, but your life needs to change. That sentence haunted me because deep down I knew my life should have changed decades earlier. After leaving hospital, I did something unexpected. I stopped running. No more endless deals, no more chasing, no more pretending. I began taking long walks through nearby villages every morning. At first, it felt uncomfortable without work. I didn't know who I was anymore. My identity had been built entirely around achievement. Then one morning, while sitting outside a tiny cafe in Yorkshire, I met an old Polish man named Victor. He noticed me staring blankly into my tea. You look like man who won wrong race, he said. I laughed harder than I had in years. Then somehow we started talking about aging, regret, death, loneliness. Victor told me he survived terrible poverty after the Cold War. You know, strange thing. He said what poor people dream money will save them, rich people discover peace was more valuable. All along I sat there speechless because that was exactly my life. I had spent 60 years chasing security while starving emotionally. Over the following months, Victor And I became close friends. We'd sit outside that cafe for hours watching rain drift across the streets while discussing life. One afternoon, he asked, if tomorrow was final day of your life, what would you regret most? I expected some dramatic answer. Instead, tears filled my eyes immediately. Not the deals, not the risks, not the failures, the moments, missed birthdays, ignored conversations, unwatched piano recitals, unnecessary overtime, unspoken affection. Tiny moments, that's what destroys old men in the end, not what they did, what they failed to notice. While busy one evening, Victor said something I now repeat constantly: people sacrifice health to make money, then sacrifice money trying to recover health. Madness. Simple sentence, massive truth. At 7 to 4, I started volunteering at a local community center, helping lonely elderly people. Funny thing is, I joined to help others, but they saved me instead. I met widowers, retired miners, former teachers, forgotten souls abandoned by modern life. And despite their struggles, many of them possessed something I lacked for decades: inner peace. One old woman named Margaret told me the secret to life is learning what deserves your energy. That sentence changed me completely, because most of my life had been spent giving energy to things that never truly loved me back: work, status, reputation, ego. None of those things sit beside your hospital bed. None of them hug you during grief. None of them stay. People do love, does presence, does. Eventually, I repaired my relationship with my children, slowly, painfully. Real healing takes time. One afternoon, Daniel invited me fishing. First time we'd spent real time together in years. At one point, we sat quietly watching sunlight ripple across the water. Then he said, you know, Dad, when I was younger, I thought you loved work more than us. Hearing that nearly broke me, because he wasn't wrong, or at least my actions suggested it. I apologized properly that day, not defensive, not performative, honest, and honest apologies carry different weight over time. Our family slowly rebuilt itself, not perfectly. Scars remained, but scars are proof healing happened. These days, my life is simple, and honestly, simple is underrated as hell. I wake early, make tea, read books, walk through quiet streets, call my children regularly, watch sunsets properly. No rushing, no pretending, no exhausting need to impress strangers. At 78, I finally understand something younger people rarely believe: peace is the real luxury, not yachts, not watches, not status. Peace, the ability to sit alone without feeling empty, the ability to love people while they're still here, the ability to experience ordinary moments fully. That's wealth, real wealth. Sometimes younger businessmen ask me for advice. They expect complicated answers about investments and leadership. Instead, I tell them this: do not build a life so expensive that it costs your soul to maintain. Every single time the room goes quiet, because deep down most people already know they're exhausted, they're just frightened to stop, frightened of falling behind. But behind who? People equally miserable. Madness. Listen carefully, because I learned this far too late: success without peace is failure wearing a nice suit. And if you spend your entire life chasing applause, you may eventually realize nobody was worth performing for in the first place. One day, your hair turns gray, your body slows down, the phone stops ringing as often, and suddenly all that remains are the people you loved or neglected. That's the final scoreboard of life. Nothing else, not money, not titles, not followers, not status, just relationships, just memories, just presence. I used to believe strong men never slowed down. Now I think truly wise men know exactly when to, because life isn't a race made, it's a collection of moments. And the tragedy is most people only realize that near the end. Sometimes I walk through my massive empty house and laugh quietly to myself. I spent decades dreaming of owning this place, yet my happiest memories happened in tiny rooms filled with people I loved. Funny, isn't it? We spend our youth chasing things, then spend old age understanding what actually mattered. If I could speak to my younger self now, I'd tell him something simple: go home earlier, take the holiday watch, the piano recital, hold your wife longer, stop trying to prove yourself to people who don't care. For God's sake, learn the difference between making a living and making a life, because the life I wanted was destroying me. But losing everything I thought mattered finally revealed something beautiful: peace had been available all along. I was simply too distracted to notice it.